In times past, alien visitations were apparently very common. Tribes in North and South America documented such visits with cave and rock drawings, legends passed down through the generations, and sculptures. These legends speak of people coming from the stars to help mankind. Almost all Native American tribes have such legends, and all appear to be true.
The Anunnaki are a group of ancient Mesopotamian deities. They are to be found in Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian cultures. The exact numbers, descriptions, and roles all contradict each other. According to the earliest Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki were the most powerful of gods in the rich pantheon, and were descended from An, the greatest of the gods. Later, they became the 7 judges who sit upon the throne in the underworld. They remain this way for some time, even in the Epic of Gilgamesh. According to old Babylonian texts, they were gods of the underworld, not of heaven. The name simply means offspring of Anu or An, the sky god, and Ki. The most prominent and probably well known of the Anunnaki was Enlil, who cleaved heaven and earth in two. Anu decided to take the heavens and left the earth to Enlil and Ki. Ki is most likely the Sumerian version of the mother goddess, seen in cultures across the globe. The physical evidence of worship of the Anunnaki is scarce. Most of what we know comes to us from texts. It appears that each of the Anunnaki were worshipped separately in individual cults, and because of this, no evidence of them as a group has been found. No image of them all together. As such, the practices of worship of the Anunnaki is thin on the ground. The first mention of them is to be found in the reign of Gudea of the 3rd dynasty of Ur. It is a term used to denote the most important deities of the Sumerian pantheon, the descendants of An. Exactly which deities were members of the group referred to as the Anunnaki is difficult to know. There is no complete list of them that survives. One of the texts mentions 50 or so members of them associated with the ancient city of Eridu. And yet, when we read of the descent of Inanna into the underworld, there are only 7. They are judges who condemn her to death. There is a group of deities known as the Igigi, and they are sometimes confused with the Anunnaki. However, in the poem of Ira, both groups are different. In one flood myth, the Igigi are 6th generation gods who perform labours for the Anunnaki. However, after 40 days they revolt against their masters, and so Enki, one of the Anunnaki, replaces them with humans. The similarities with the biblical flood and numbers are quite remarkable. It is obvious that Mesopotamian myths heavily influenced or were the origin of much of the biblical Old Testament. In the Babylonian creation text known as the Enuma Elish, the god Marduk divides the Anunnaki and gives them roles. 300 in heaven and 300 on earth. As a thank you, the Anunnaki built Esagila as an abode for Marduk, Enlil and Ea. When they had finished, they built themselves shrines. In later Assyrian texts, they were offspring of Anu and Ki, who were brother and sister, and themselves children of the gods of the celestial poles, and whose heritage stretched back to the original gods Tiamat and Abzu. Here we begin to see clues to the use of these deities as names for the bodies in the sky, the stars that shine above. This then is the brief knowledge we have of the Anunnaki. Now we must delve deeper, and to do so we must enter their world.
Throughout antiquity, legends speak of travelers from the stars who helped mankind on Earth. American tribes say these travelers were benevolent beings, and tales of their existence are still told today. The Hopi believe their ancestors came from the Pleiades, the place or people they call Chuachucan, or those who cling together, a reference, it seems, to that tightly grouped starry cluster as it appears to the naked eye. Likewise, early Dakota legends speak of the Pleiades as the abode of the ancestors. Other native oral histories or legends speak of an origin, if not in the Pleiades, then in the stars generally, or other constellations. The Cree, for example, arrived on Earth from the stars as spirits and then became human beings. Other native legends, including those of the Lakota, speak not necessarily of star people, but of mysterious beings coming from above as spheres of light that in turn abduct children, a reference to popular folklore about alien abduction and breeding programs that are not for the faint-hearted. The Zuni Indians offer one of many belief systems, if not actual experiences, related to ancestors who came from the sky, a phrasing that has since morphed into the more New Age star people reference as opposed to sky people. A Lakota legend speaks of 7 maidens being chased by a bear. On their knees, they prayed for divine intervention. The result being that the ground beneath them erupted high into the air, lifting them out of harm's way as the bear clawed at the risen ground. The result was Devil's Tower, Wyoming, the bear's claws having carved vertical geological features into the rock, and the 7 maidens have been installed above as the Pleiades. Clifford Mahudi, a Zuni elder and member of the Kachina Society, tells us that his grandfathers taught him about a very direct connection his people have had with beings from space. Mahudi at the same time explains that the language of his grandfathers, his elders, was not, of course, English, and that he has interpreted their words and concepts into modern phrasings that nonetheless accurately represent the old beliefs. A concept that has gained a foothold in some quarters of modern Native American thought, that the ancestors were extraterrestrial aliens, and that they continue to visit and interact with peoples to this day. The modern unidentified flying object, or UFO craze, began in the late 1940s when a wave of people reported seeing strange objects in the skies above America. Indeed, it was in 1947 the term flying saucer entered the popular consciousness after pilot Kenneth Arnold witnessed several brightly lit saucer-like objects weaving in and out of distant mountain peaks while he was flying in Washington state. This was the first wave of UFO sightings. However, an earlier wave occurred in Britain in 1909 when hundreds of people described flying objects shaped like dirigibles and emitting beams of light carrying out extremely advanced maneuvers overhead. A decade later, throughout 1896 and 97, there was a rash of similar sightings in the United States. But these weren't the first accounts of alien spacecraft on record. Legends of godlike beings coming from the heavens exist in many cultures. Throughout North America, there are numerous caves that date back thousands of years. These paintings, figures, and objects much like the modern imagery of aliens and flying saucers. One intriguing legend comes from the First Nations people of Central Ontario. Their Skyman tale may in fact be one of the earliest alien encounters on record. According to the story recorded in 1917 by Colonel G.E. Ladlaw, 500 years ago, there was a large village, about 550 native people living somewhere in that region. One day, a pair of them stumbled upon a stranger sitting on the grass in a field. This figure, a male, was notably clean and shining bright. The natives approached the stranger and asked who he was and how he came to be in the field. "I am not one of you. I do not belong to this land. I dropped down from above," the stranger explained. Showing unusual hospitality, the Abjwa invited him back to their village. The stranger agreed, but on one condition: "Go home and clean the place where I will stay, and when you come back for me, I will go with you for a few days." Agreeing, the Amjawa men went back to their community, told their fellow villagers about their experience, and cleaned the hut where they would house the Skyman. The stranger did in fact accompany them to their village, but he was clearly restless. He watched the skies often and told people that in 2 days something would come and get him to take him back to the sky. One afternoon, Skyman looked up and said, "It is coming." The villagers craned their necks and turned their eyes above and saw something that looked like a bright shining star streaking down from the heavens and hover near the ground. This was the most beautiful thing any of them had ever seen. Skyman entered the shining star and disappeared from view. The shining star then shot back into the sky and faded away. This tale seems to be a description of an encounter with an ancient astronaut, as seen in many cultures and popularized by Swiss theorist Erich von Däniken of Chariots of the Gods fame. Many modern UFO theorists believe Skyman was a marooned extraterrestrial astronaut whose own craft was somehow damaged or destroyed. They point to the fact that Skyman clearly entered the glowing star as proof of the object was a spacecraft of some sort. Was he clean and shining bright because he wore a silvery pressure suit? Did he request his hosts clean his quarters out of fear of contracting human viruses against which he had no immunity? Many researchers believe Skyman was no mythological tale, but rather an actual encounter of the first kind between an ancient alien and an entire tribal community.
Appearing out of nowhere, and at least as early as the 5th millennium BC, the earliest known civilization, the Sumerians of Sumer in Mesopotamia, was initially a non-Semitic culture. By 3000 BC, and as a result of its sophisticated irrigated agriculture, Sumer flourished as a nation and developed a considerable power base through the development of its numerous city-states like Erech, Eridu, Lagash and Kish. It is said that the Sumerians invented cuneiform writing and were way ahead of their time, having advanced knowledge in music, poetry, art, mathematics, astronomy and science. For the ancient Sumerians, music was a tool that helped them describe the cosmos. The Sumerians were later conquered by their long-term rivals, the Akkadians, under Sargon I. The Akkadians were a Semitic people, whose city Akkad was their capital. After 2000 BC, Sumeria Akkad declined as a nation, and was later absorbed by the expanding empires of Babylonia and Assyria. In Sumerian creation myth, the angels, known as the Anunnaki, or great sons of Anu, were the founders of their culture. The names Angel, Anunnaki and Anakim have much in common. They are indicative of the ancient ancestors who brought the secrets to the rest of the world. Interestingly, Anunnaki is phonetically similar to the Hebrew Anakim, the giant race who appear in the story later, and also Angakok, the shaman from Greenland to Alaska. They were known as the Shining Ones. The earliest accounts of the Shining Ones can be found in 4 principal sources. Firstly, in the Sumerian tablets from the Library of Nippur, where they are named the Anunnaki. Secondly, in the Book of Enoch, where they are referred to as angels, watchers, and Nephilim. Thirdly, in the book of Jubilees. And fourthly, in the biblical book of Genesis, where they are given the name Elohim. The Sumerian El is usually translated as God, but the feminine Elohim is the plural of El. In Genesis, the phrase Ah Elohim is also used, meaning the Elohim. El means brightness and shining. Indeed, the Semitic word El is found in many ancient languages. For instance, the Anglo-Saxon elf means shining being, and so El needs to be translated not as God, but as the Shining One, and Ah Elohim, being plural, should read the Shining Ones. We find that this is the most commonly used term in the Old Testament for God, and indeed all other gods, as the scribes even recognised other gods at that time. The name Sumer comes from Shumer and means literally the land of the watchers. It is none other than the ancient biblical land of Shinar, which amazingly means the place of the Shining Ones. The Shining Ones are in the Bible and have been there ever since they wrote themselves in. Elohim is usually translated incorrectly as Lord, and if you read the Bible and replace Lord, and don't forget about the added words, with Shining Ones, you will see a remarkable difference. A reading now of how it was meant to be. We now have the shining light of knowledge spoken of in 2 Corinthians 4:6. The Lord God of the Bible is the light who gives birth to the divine spark of Christ. A pure reading of the global understanding that God was the basis for illumination, the fire, the sun, the light, and heads of those that shine from that brilliance, the source of intelligence itself.
Of all the native North American tribes, one appears to have a direct connection to the stars and aliens. That is, the Hopi tribes. Hopis call themselves Hopitu, the peaceful people. Hopis, meaning good, peaceful, or wise, live in the northeastern Arizona area at the southern end of the Black Mesa. A mesa is the name given to a small, isolated, flat-topped hill with 3 steep sides called the first mesa, the second mesa, and the third mesa. On the mesa tops are the Hopi villages called Pueblos. The Pueblo of Orabi, or the third mesa, started in 1050 and is the oldest in North America that has lived in continuity. Evidence suggests that the Hopi consist of the descendants of various groups that entered the country from the north, the east, and the south, and that a series of movements covered a period of probably 3 centuries and perhaps considerably longer. Related to people of the various Pueblos in the east, the Hopis never actually had a single group identity. They were independent villages, sharing with the Zuni and the Pueblos a basic culture and view of the sacred, while sharing among themselves their own language base. Native Americans believed in constellations. In many cases, they believed in the same formations for stars that we do. Their constellations seemed to be marked by the same knowledge that Western civilization on the other part of the globe was aware of. They call them by different names, but the star arrangements are very similar. They believed in maps that have been drawn that they existed at the center of the Earth or Turtle Island, that beyond them was the sky, and that beyond the sky were dimensional portals or sky holes as they called them. Beyond the dimensional portals was an area that they called the Ocean of Pitch, where the beauty of the night sky and the galaxies spun out towards them. Beyond that were the boundaries of the universe, and that set along the rim at the boundaries of the universe were 4 different extraterrestrial groups. They believed in Achivas, the sacred ceremonial places to honor the earth. These were the places that shaman would go into the earth to do their most sacred work. The reason that Achivas are built into the earth for sacred work is because, according to legend, at the destruction of each of the ages of mankind, the people that were pure of heart went down into the buxom of the earth and were remained there protected. According to them, they dwelt in the center of the earth with a group of beings they called the Ant People. Drawings of the Ant People are remarkably similar to the gray aliens of today. Large heads, little stocky bodies, long spindly fingers, in some cases 4, 5, or 6 digits. Some of these drawings have the indication of telepathic thought waves coming from the beings' heads themselves. The Native Americans believed that the home of the Kachinas was on top of a mountain where there were great cloud formations. Today, some believe that UFOs often hide in what we call lenticular clouds, which are cloud formations that seem to be produced to conceal the ships from the visible eye spectrum. Real lenticular clouds move with the rest of the clouds, whereas the UFO clouds do not, often sitting 5 hours in one place. Hopi Indian legends tell of a sure certainty in the future that the tribe's faithful will be lifted to other planets on the Day of Purification, and they watch and wait for the UFOs that will take them there. Is this reminiscent of the Christian version of the rapture? The legend is born of an ancient rock carving in Arizona depicting a dome-shaped saucer object and maiden that has become a core part of the tribe's religious beliefs. Elders in the Hopi community have said they perceive UFOs as having a direct connection with the old petroglyph drawings and the foretelling of visitors from space who arrive for the Day of Purification. On that day, all wicked people and wrongdoers will be punished or destroyed, said Chief Dan Chekawachuva. He said that we believe other planets are inhabited and that our prayers are heard there. The arrow on which the dome-shaped object rests stands for travel through space. The Hopi maiden on the dome-shaped drawing represents purity. Those Hopi who survive Purification Day will travel to other planets. We, the faithful Hopi, have seen the ships and know they are true. He said the 1st Division occurred in 1906 when Chief Yukuma was driven from the old town of Orabi to Hoteville. The 2nd Division, said the chief, happened in 1969 when contact was made with a flying saucer that whispered a message to the tribe. The 3rd Division is said to be the precursor of Purification Day, and until it arrives, the chief said many Hopi men wear their bang haircuts that represents a window from which they continue to look for the true white brother who will arrive with matching pieces of the stone petroglyph. But the chief won't see the day come, or perhaps he will. He's been missing since 1972, lost to the tribe while walking to a valley where a UFO had been seen. Kachinas are also used in Hopi tribes. They are connected to powerful ancestor spirits called to bring rain to help the crops grow. There are over 300 different Kachinas. There is a prophecy about the return of the blue Kachina to herald in the fifth age of man. Hopi prophecies are very famous, but as with all prophecies, their timeline became invalid after 1939 when space-time altered. The concepts are fundamentally correct, but the timeline for them to play out is undetermined. The Hopi Indians are the record keepers of the Native Americans. The people of the Southwest, along with the Southeast, had full-time religious leaders with shrines or temple buildings. Most Native Americans believe that in the universe there exists an Almighty, a spiritual force that is the source of all life. The Almighty belief is not pictured as a man in the sky, but is believed to be formless and exist in the universe. The sun is viewed as the power of the Almighty. They are not worshiping the sun, but praying to the Almighty, and the sun is a sign and symbol for that. Native Americans show less interest in an afterlife, unlike the Christians. They assume the souls of the dead go to another part of the universe where they have a new existence, carrying on everyday activities like they were still alive. They're just in a different world. The religious and ceremonial life of the Hopi centers in the kiva, which is simply a room wholly or partly subterranean and entered by way of ladder through an opening in the flat roof. While the membership of the kiva consists principally of men and boys from certain clan or clans, there is no case in which all the members of a kiva belong to one clan, a condition inseparable from the provision that a man may change his kiva membership, and in fact made necessary by the existence of more clans than kivas. It is probable, nevertheless, that originally the kivas were clan institutions. Further south in Central America, there are mysteries that have befuddled modern man for centuries. Around the year 900 BC, something new had appeared in the jungles and wilderness of what is now Guatemala and southern Mexico: civilization. For about the next 2,000 years that civilization flourished, the Maya built cities, invested in farming and in trade, and created a calendar. The population soared, with some estimates suggesting that there were at one time as many as 22 million Mayans. There were farmers, merchants, performers, students, artists, musicians, and then at some point it seemed as if the whole Mayan civilization simply vanished. Mayan cities were abandoned, the people's traditions forgotten, and their language lost forever. What made them leave, and where did they go? Some experts think the Maya were victims of a natural disaster, perhaps a massive earthquake or a volcanic eruption, but the cities left behind by the Maya were intact. None of the temples or stone buildings had any mark of damage. Other historians blame drought and famine. The Maya were good farmers, but as their population grew, it became harder to feed everyone. and so the theory goes they left their cities behind in search of food. Other researchers suggest that the Maya destroyed themselves, perhaps through civil war, but there are no records of such a conflict in the records they left behind. In 2012, the Mexican government released some never-seen-before Mayan artifacts, statues, masks, plaques, and documents found in the inner spaces of a temple in Mexico. They claimed, rather startlingly, that the Maya had apparently had contact with extraterrestrials. We believe for certain that aliens worked with the Mayans, said Luis Augusto Garcia Recido, the Minister of Tourism for the Mexican state of Campeche. Was it possible that the Maya were themselves space travelers, and that when they disappeared they quite simply had gone back to their home planet? Throughout Mayan history, its rulers often claimed to be descended from the stars and the planets. One such king, Pakal of Palenque, came to the throne when he was 12 and ruled for the next 68 years until his death at the age of 80. In a time without modern medicines, the very fact he lived to such an age is surprising in itself, in humans at least. But even more surprising is the ruler's tomb. When Pakal was buried, a unique design was carved into the lid of his sarcophagus. It appears to show the king sitting in a type of cockpit. Could that be an oxygen mask on his face, levers in his hands and pedals at his feet? Outside the cockpit is a flame shooting from an exhaust. Was this very detailed illustration meant to depict the king returning to the mother planet? What's perhaps most startling is that this is a tomb that was carved over 1,000 years ago. How could Mayan people have created images of space travel if they hadn't seen it? Others believe that the Mayas' huge temples aligned with solar and lunar activity. They were in fact some sort of ancient landing pads for spaceships, or a way of communicating with beings on other planets. For believers, this explains how the Mayans had such advanced knowledge for their time. Was extraterrestrial intelligence the reason for their advanced farming techniques? And why did they appear to have such in-depth understanding of the solar system, including planets yet to be discovered? Astrophysicist Carl Sagan argues that while many legends, artifacts, and purported out-of-place artifacts were cited in support of this ancient astronaut's idea, very few require more than a passing mention and can easily be explained more conventionally. Still, there has yet to be a definitive.
Anu, or An, was the chief sky sun god, and means shining. The Anunnaki therefore means sons of the Shining One, or sons of light. In Ireland, the term for shining was Ain. There may be a connection here with the Tuatha De Danann, the Shining Ones of Ireland, and the serpent cult that St. Patrick had removed from the Emerald Isle. Also, there is an unusual, semi-nomadic, bear-worshipping tribe in Japan, known as the Ainu. The Ainu look Caucasian, with round heads, white skin, wavy thick hair, and grey or blue eyes. The Ainu are said to have been living in many of Japan's islands, like Okinawa, for over 7,000 years, and it is said that the Ainu share a language similarity with the Basque, who live in the Pyrenees, the mountains bordering Spain and France. Also interesting is the fact that in these Ainu regions a number of stone circles have been found with a slender, upright stone in the centre, similar to those found in the British Isles and elsewhere. These Anunnaki, or Shining Ones, were a culturally and technically advanced people who settled in a mountain valley in the Middle East around 8200 BC, and, as their primary concern, established an agricultural centre we now know as the Garden of Eden for the teaching and training of the local tribesmen. They were described as the shining countenanced lords of cultivation, elevated to gods. Anu and his wife Antu had two sons. Enlil, the storm god, ruled the air and atmosphere, and Enki, the water. Enki is also the wise teacher known as Ea or Oannes, who led the fish beings that came from the sea, or indeed from across the sea. Enki was depicted as a goat with a fish's tail, which became the sign of Capricorn. Enki or Ea's consort was Ninki or Damkina, and their children were Marduk and Nanch. Enlil, also known as Bel or Baal, and whose patron city was Nippur, later ruled in Anu's name. Ninlil or Ninkar-Shag ruled the earth. The early Sumerians described themselves as constantly nourished by the milk of Ninkar-Shag, the great mother moon goddess. The Syrians knew her as Atargatis, the mermaid. The son of Enlil and Ninlil was the war god Ninurtu, also known as Nimrod, and like Horus and as Osiris, he became associated with the star constellation of Orion. We also have Nana, who was the moon goddess, and Utu, a sun god, also known as Ogmash and Shamash. It was Shamash who later given the 29 laws to King Hammurabi. There is also Inanna or Ishtar, who was associated with Venus, as symbolised by the pentacle. The texts that we have on the Sumerian deities vary. In fact, they evolve over time, losing some of their historicity as the story develops, making it more and more difficult to see the origins. Trying to bring clarity to the tales of Sumerian and Mesopotamian deities is like trying to learn Mandarin backwards. However, due to the names we are given, such as Enki for instance, who is identified with Ea and Oannes, we're being led to cross-reference the Anunnaki with the fish beings, who seem to have come ashore in Sumeria from the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, and at a time which is now lost in antiquity. Indeed, we find that both are the same people, and that the fish beings are also the Anunnaki Shining Ones, the gods of Sumeria, and the Elohim of the Bible. And when we then cross-reference these fish beings with the Nita gods and the Shemshu-Or, or Aku, and whom it is said appeared in Egypt from a submerged island, we also have to include the origins of the Hindu Naga serpent deities, who also came from a lost island. It can easily be concluded that the Shining Ones of Sumeria, Egypt and India were really incoming people from a lost or destroyed land. These connections allow us to piece together their story and see a little more of their historical territory, much of which has been lost or deliberately hidden from us. We can see then that these Shining Ones, who later became worshipped as the Sumerian pantheon of gods and goddesses, seem to have been a dynastic ruling family or clan. Anu, the chief authority, became the universal father god, as a pictograph from his founded city of Uruk dated to 3000 BC depicts. The lineages of all these deities are mixed, with sisters, wives, mothers, fathers, brothers and sons, intermingling and confusing the whole thing. Considering the many thousands of years between the composition of these texts and the actual existence of these peculiar peoples or beliefs, this is no surprise. What is clear is that certain deities do continually stand out from the crowd, namely Anu, Enlil, Enki, Ninkershag, Inanna and Utu Shamash. And that the form and structure of these deities would go on to spawn Egyptian, Greek and Roman pantheons for centuries, if not thousands of years. No wonder then that the Watchers, the military arm of these Shining Ones, should in later myths be doing battle with the gods of Greece, Egypt and Rome, not to mention the rest of the world. Just as the fallen insurgent Nephilim or watchers do battle with their own ruling family of Shining Ones in the Bible. One interesting detail we should perhaps mention is that, like Osiris of ancient Egypt, Enlil was depicted as a bull, and like Set, his brother, Enki of the Absu or Abyss, was depicted as a serpent. Interestingly, because the people of Atlantis were supposed to have worshipped the bull, which is a remarkable coincidence, taking into account the association with deities have with the biblical deluge.
There are dozens of stories, legends, and myths surrounding Mount Shasta in Northern California, adding to its mystery and allure. The Native Americans have always felt that the mountain was the sacred center of the universe. They even have stories that talk about it being the home of the Creator. Mount Shasta straddles the territories of the Shasta, Wintu, Akmuwa, Astungwa, and Modoc tribes. Not surprisingly, the imposing mountain shows up in a lot of tribal myths and stories. It's especially important to the Wintu tribe, who trace their people's origin back to a sacred spring on the mountain. They have always done their sacred ceremonies there. They continue to do them to this day. Every August, they do their ceremonies for just the tribe and invited guests. Finally, there is the legend of Telos. According to researchers, Telos is a crystal city inside the mountain, inhabited by higher dimensional beings called Lemurians from the ancient continent of Lemura that was in the North Pacific Ocean many thousands of years ago. As the story goes, Lemura and Atlantis got into a thermonuclear war and sank their continents. The Lemurians fled into Mount Shasta, and that's where they've remained ever since. Stories from the 1940s say the Lemurians were actually seen walking into town. They were 7 feet tall, dressed in long white robes and sandals. They went to the general store to buy supplies and paid for their purchases with chunks of gold. The shopkeeper would take the gold, turn around and try to give them change, and the Lemurians would be gone. Today, no one reports eyewitness accounts of Lemurians in the flesh, but some locals believe the smooth, saucer-shaped lenticular clouds that often gather at the summit of Mount Shasta are engineered by the Lemurians to camouflage alien cargo ships docking at Telos. From 7-foot-tall Lemurians, we visit the smaller ant people. The Hopi Indians have been living in the high desert of Arizona for thousands of years. They are the direct descendants of the mysterious Anasazi, the Ancient Ones, a civilization that flourished between the 5th and 13th century AD before suddenly disappearing. According to legend, they were led to their current home by a curiously UFO-shaped cloud during the day and a moving star by night. During the third cycle, the Hopi described a period during which the Earth was ruled by an advanced civilization that had technology far superior to our own. A key element in these legends is represented by the flying shills, the Patwavatas. The advanced flying shills had the ability to travel quickly between distant places, and they also carried fearsome weapons that could level entire cities. They are strikingly similar to what we call today unidentified flying objects. In Hopi legend, the world has gone through several phases or cycles already, and we are in this time living in the fourth world. In the original world, which was according to legend destroyed by fire, the benevolent alien ant people sequestered everyone underground with them and shared what they had. The people were safe from the fire and destruction above. It is said that the ant people even sacrificed their own food to aid the people. As the sky god UCM.ONE systematically destroyed the world above, the people waited patiently for the fires to burn and the earth to cool before they came up. When the earth was completed, the sky god gave the blessings and told them to love and nurture the earth so that destruction was not warranted again. The ant people took their place as ants, and new life began in the second world. Humanity being what it is, there have been 2 worlds destroyed since then, and this, the fourth world, is set for the appearance of the 5th and final world. This can be compared to the Christians awaiting the rapture, where the Creator comes back and the ultimate world begins. This was prophesied to happen when the blue kachina, or the blue star, appeared. This was to signify the end of the fourth world, and would be foretold by the kachinas removing their masks and becoming one with the powerful beings they are said to represent.
It is said that Enlil, who took over as the leader of the Shining Ones, lived for thousands of years. But those who use this to show that these Shining Ones were special beings that originally came from another world, or even another dimension, forget one thing: that Enlil was a term used for the leader, and was thus passed on, like the term king or pharaoh is passed on. It was also the title of the sun, which of course would seem to be eternal. Part of the Sumerian creation myth states, "At Karsag, where heaven and earth met, the heavenly assembly, the great sons of Anu, arrived, the many wise ones." The Anunnaki seem to have arrived from another land across the sea. They brought with them special knowledge, unknown to the previous inhabitants. It is said, mankind learned from the Shining Ones. They set things in order. We could ask why they felt they had to set things in order. Perhaps this order has something to do with the chaotic aftermath of a global calamity that had destroyed their homeland, according to the accounts. A flood, for instance, that appears in myths across the world. In the famous Sumerian kings list, we are told that the Anunnaki ruled in Sumeria, both before and after the deluge, and that it was after the deluge that they then set kings on the throne to govern the land and rule in their stead. However, if we are to believe the accounts given of the fish beings, we are also told that these Shining Ones had first come ashore from their submerged land after a similar catastrophe, an earlier one than the deluge related in the Bible and other sources. Could these great global flood disasters in fact be bringing together tales of a much earlier flood, and so scientists are searching for the wrong period? It's possible that the Shining Ones knew when these catastrophic events were going to happen, and had predicted the deluge, hence Noah being warned to prepare for the event. This theory is supported by the information encoded in various sources, which lead us to the symbol of the Ouroboros snake and its deeper meaning. It is as if, again, these people had profound knowledge of cycles, and in particular the 25,800-year precessional cycle, which was believed to have begun with the tilting of the Earth from its upright position. It would appear that it was believed that these recurring catastrophes were linked to the beginning and end point of the precessional cycle, linked to the very event that caused the Earth to incline in the first place. This does not necessarily prove that the Earth's axis was once upright. However, it does mean that it was believed the axis was vertical, and thus revealing an amazing knowledge of the heavens and Earth's place in it.
Using the Mayan calendar, doomsday theorists predicted the end of the world was scheduled for the 21st of December 2012. Those who believed that the calendar gave the date of the end of the world had theories as to how we would meet our doom, such as mysterious planets on a collision course with Earth, or a reverse in the Earth's rotation. Some gathered at ancient Mayan sites to await the end. Others stocked up on water and canned goods, hoping to survive. The day passed without incident, and it seems we are still here. The modern notion that humankind may have been influenced in ancient times by an intelligence far exceeding our own is not only popular, it's almost enigmatic to Western culture. Among the faithful believers in paleo-contact, as Carl Sagan termed it, mankind's earliest innovations were the result of an alien intervention, either by beings who showed us techniques that could lead to the formation of a civilized society, or by direct manipulation of our genetic substructure for purposes of speeding along the natural evolutionary process. The paleo-contact approach is most often invoked by those who seek to find common ground between UFO reports, abduction encounters, and the mythologies of ancient Indians. However, a recent book on the subject, Encounters with Star People, looks at the phenomenon from both a historic perspective as well as from the standpoint that modern-day encounters with what many natives call star people are still occurring today. Ancient astronaut theorists maintain that star people have been visiting Earth since the beginning of time. To support their claims, they often portray the legends of American Indian tribes as proof of human interaction with the star people. There are also many modern stories of UFO encounters, crashes, and extraterrestrials by adventurers, cowboys, military men, and miners in the northern plains. One of the stories described in the book details the story of Chanshe, an aging native whose story is a strange encounter with a spaceman who kindly attempted to take Blue Sun, his faithful family dog. The story goes that a small exploration craft, some variety of a small UFO, had apparently landed behind a butte near Chauncey's home, and subsequently a thin, ghostly pale man appeared who apparently conversed with him. After their visit, Chauncey and Blue Sun walked the visitor back to his vessel, at which time the alien being was said to have taken interest in the fact that the dog obeyed when Chauncey commanded it to heel. At this point, the spaceman gestured in such a way as to suggest that the creature board his vessel and join him, at which point Chauncey had laid his gun across his arm, merely as a measure of intimidation, expressing that the visitor be along his way and without his dog. The more modern reports of alien interaction and UFO sightings detailed in the book are all very unique in this regard, especially since they often seem to express an ongoing interaction between natives and the Star people, to the point that almost becoming commonplace in their culture and society. A number of reports also appear in the book that cover aspects of ufology that have more conventional parallels, including UFOs hovering over weapon sites, underground bases, alien abduction, and popular myths associated with spacefaring alien beings working as liberators of mankind in some capacity. In another part of the world, drawings and carvings support the theory of a race of beings that were here to teach humanity about the land in ancient Sumeria. This race was believed to be superior and was thought to originate from the skies. It was through their teachings that the Sumerians were able to learn how to live in the world and take care of it until the gods of creation returned. Just like the ant people of the Hopi, they were there to teach mankind about their planet and how to use its resources. An interesting note is that the Hopi word for ant is Anu. The word for friends is Nakai. There is also the similar pronunciation of the Hopi ancestors, Anastasi. Again, we see this phrase in another belief in another part of the world. The depictions of the ant people closely resemble the Greys in modern ufology. Whether there is an actual connection between the Hopi of the Southwest and the ancient Sumerians and Egyptians or not, it certainly gives one pause that creation stories were very similar. It also makes the point that celestial communication has been a curiosity of mankind for much longer than UFO sightings in the 20th century.
In the Old Testament, God is indistinguishable from the angel or messenger, known as Yahweh. He looks the same and acts as his representative. There is no difference here from the Babylonian, Egyptian and shamanic practice. In the New Testament, the angels actually take part in the judgment at the end times. Alternatively, they may be those who had experienced enlightenment and then fell from grace. We are told that the Nephilim, or Watchers, began to mix with the indigenous people. These were the angels who seem to have been the military arm of these Shining Ones, and who were initially employed to guard the Garden of Eden. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Semjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together, and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. From this union, a hybrid race was produced, a race of giants, so we are told. And all the others together with them took unto them wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go into them, and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments, and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them, and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh, and drink the blood. And then the earth laid accusations against the lawless ones. And then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven, and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. These insurgents also passed on knowledge, and taught them combat and how to make weapons. And Azazel taught men to make swords, and knives, and shields, and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth, and the art of working them, and bracelets, and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all colouring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. Semjaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, Armoros the resolving of enchantments, Barachgal taught astrology, Kokabel the constellations, Ezequiel the knowledge of the clouds, Araquiel the signs of the earth, Shamshiel the signs of the sun, and Sariel the course of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven. And all this was seen as a violation against a set of laws laid down by the Shining Ones, who were possessive of their knowledge. Thou seest that Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. And Semjaza, to whom thou hast given authority to bear rule over his associates. And they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with the women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. Enoch, a scribe, who was taught by the Shining Ones, was then employed as a messenger or intermediary between the Shining Ones and these fallen ones, who had decided to abandon their divinity to live amongst the tribes of man. Enoch was then sent to tell the insurgents that a severe sentence had been passed on them and that they were soon to be punished. In brief, the punishment sent is the flood. It is as if the Shining Ones wanted to wash away the sins of the earth that had been created by their own kind, the fallen ones. In the Bible, we are told that God, or rather the gods known as Elohim, spoke to Noah, telling him that the seasons of summer and winter would be more extreme from the time of the flood onward. This both supports and is supported in turn by the book of Enoch, which states how, in those days Noah saw that the earth had sunk down, and that destruction was nigh. And he said, "Tell me, what is transacting upon the earth? For the earth labours and is violently shaken." In the King James Version of the Bible we find this: "Behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard." In Psalm 68:8 it is written, "The earth shook, the heavens also dropped at the presence of God, and even Sinai itself was moved at the presence of God." The heavens dropping would mean that to the observers in the Sinai region, the earth beneath their feet was tipping relatively upward and northward. In his written book, Timaeus and Critias, Plato describes an awful catastrophe in which the earth moved forwards and backwards, and again to right and left, and upwards and downwards, wandering every way in all 6 directions. But as many scholars and researchers have now acknowledged, the God of the Bible and his angels are said to be the Sumerian Anu and his sons and entourage, the Anunnaki or Shining Ones, who are reported to have landed in Mesopotamia and there created the Garden of Eden. And so we must now draw a conclusion. When we first started out in this task of discovering the Anunnaki, we found a complex and mystifying series of tales that seemed to make little sense. Slowly, we have pulled apart the names, places and myths to reveal something very simple. Many thousands of years ago, something catastrophic occurred, and a highly knowledgeable and wise people fled. They eventually landed somewhere in Mesopotamia, where they came across a less developed people. Civilization emerged as the new people taught their new people how to build, mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, and much more. Their wisdom was so great that later generations would call them gods and angels. They had descended from the shining heavenly host, but divisions set in as the two cultures bred and made the bloodline less pure. the Watchers, who had gone bad, and the Shining Ones, who were not happy. In a simple tale that has become very complex over vast periods of time, in our age it is being confused yet further by the addition of extraterrestrial origins for the Anunnaki. There is, however, no need for such imaginings. There is simply a need to understand the time, culture, belief systems, and mind of our very human ancestors.
UFO skeptics and believers are locked in a fierce debate over the existence of aliens once again, following 3 apparent sightings recently. Sightings have been caught on camera in Chile, Bolivia, and Brazil, and it's fair to say a lot of people are losing their minds over them. The latest of these sightings was filmed in the Chilean capital of Santiago, with 4 glowing orbs seen hovering above skyscrapers in the city. It has been viewed over 100,000 times and has split the online community on whether it's actually genuine. Commentators on YouTube were quick to give their opinion, with many believing that an alien invasion is in the cards, while others simply thought it was either military planes or helicopters. Neither seems entirely convincing. This came after more eerie footage emerged earlier in the month in a rural neighborhood in Bolivia, where a giant flying saucer was captured on film above mountains in El Alto, a city in the northwest Bolivian region of La Paz. The clip shows an unusually shaped object flying through the sky before disappearing and then reappearing in the clouds. It was uploaded to a UFO spotting website dedicated to gathering evidence of alien sightings and has now been shared worldwide. Cynics believe that the footage is a hoax to increase online traffic for the filmmaker's website and has simply been created by using a digital editing program. Believers were given yet another chance of hope in southern Brazil too, with a very similar looking UFO appearing in their skies. The Express reported that a woman named Marmel posted the picture online showing another blurred dish shape in the sky, which she didn't even notice while taking the scenic photo. Could this be evidence that the Kachinas are returning? South America has some of the most amazing UFO encounters on record. Especially remarkable is the sheer variety of the sightings, which range from straightforward accounts of flying objects to abductions, landings, cattle mutilation, as well as contactee accounts and strange beings that emerge from oddly shaped craft. In addition, there are particularities to these sightings that are uniquely South American twists to the tales that are to be found on no other continent. Undoubtedly, the best known of the South American encounters occurred in 1957. A Brazilian farmer by the name of Vilas Boas was working in his fields with a tractor when he claims he was abducted by aliens and taken aboard a spacecraft. There he claims to have had intercourse with a beautiful fair-skinned girl with high cheekbones, a very pointed chin, and vivid blue Chinese-type slant eyes, who stood about 4 feet 8 inches high without her helmet. The case was thoroughly investigated, and researchers admitted feeling impressed at the clarity of Boa's evidence. In the ensuing months and years, the details were checked and rechecked by dozens of separate people without revealing any contradiction in the nature of the farmer's story. As such, it merits its notoriety as one of the most riveting abduction accounts on record. Significantly, the Villas-Boas incident is far from being the only reported case of abduction within that same province of Minas Gerais. In fact, this is a region which, according to Jerry Randalls, has one of the highest concentrations of claimed abduction anywhere in the world. In August 1962, for example, there was an incident that made even the Boas case look tame. Unfortunately, on this occasion, the victim did not survive to tell the tale. Briefly, the facts are these. On the 19th of that month, 2 glowing red spheres the size of footballs are reported to have flown over the hut of a poor diamond prospector named Revelino Marfa de Silva. Later, 2 aliens, approximately 1.5 feet in height, entered the hut and peered at the family as they lay in bed. The next day, one of the man's sons was surprised to discover 2 strange balls outside the hut. One was entirely black, and the other black and white. When the father came out to look at them, they apparently rose up at him and enveloped him in a cloud of yellow smoke. He was never seen again. Shortly afterwards, the son was reported to have been taken into custody by the Brazilian army, some say as a means of silencing him. In 1965, around 50 Indians of the Tabu tribe were astonished to see 3 tall beings emerge from 2 saucer-like craft that came down close to the Argentinian town of Formosa, near the border with Paraguay. The beings appeared to have luminous halos around their bodies, and the Indians knelt down and worshipped them. Witnesses speak of verbal contact being established with the aliens, who informed the Indians that the space people would eventually come in greater numbers. An Indian who made a close approach to the craft was warned off, and eventually the beings returned to the craft, which took off in a dazzling burst of light. Police who hurried to the scene are believed to have taken numerous photographs, which are reputed to show at least 3 landed saucers and 5 aliens. Beings that emerged from an egg-shaped craft assured a local hunter that before long, the whole world would come to know them. The hunter, named Felipe Martinez, claims to have met the aliens on no fewer than 3 occasions. The first time in 1949, he ran toward a hovering object revolving above the trees, only to be paralyzed by a mysterious burst of energy. From a door in the object, a small being then descended down a ladder. Standing no more than a meter in height, the being was described as wearing a helmet and clothes like a diver's costume. In an interview, Martinez claims to have been taken aboard one of the alien vessels, which oddly was piloted by a crew of 4 beings around a meter in height, and another blonde-haired being just over 6 feet tall. He claims to have been placed in a spacesuit, but this had an alarming effect on his heart rate, and the suit was quickly removed. Conversation with the aliens was slow and difficult, but according to Martinez, the aliens' name for their craft was Seal. In 1963, in Parana State, Brazil, a crowd of onlookers was amazed to see a bright zinc-colored object descend into flames of a major forest fire. Even more astonishing was that after a quarter of an hour, several tall beings were seen to emerge from the craft and strode around in the flames, completely untouched by the furnace-like heat that surrounded them. Even more perplexing was the fact that the beings seemed intent on collecting charred rocks and other material from the fire, which they then took back to the waiting spaceship. This done, the craft then departed as silently as it came. Witnesses described it as a basin-shaped craft 35 meters in diameter and around 8 meters in height. In 1954, near the Venezuelan capital of Caracas, 2 men claimed to have wrestled with a hairy creature that was seen to emerge from a luminous craft. One of the men, Gustav Gonzalez says he was thrown 15 feet through the air by a tiny dwarf-like creature who, despite its size, possessed incredible strength. It also proved impervious to a knife blade thrust. Gonzalez, who lunged at the creature with a sharp knife, saw to his astonishment that the blade just glanced off the body as though made of steel. Apparently angered, the creature's eyes literally glowed in the dark, sending out a blinding flash of light that left both men dazzled and disoriented. Before the craft took off, Gonzalez's friend noticed that two other creatures of similar description were gathering earth and rocks and loading them aboard the hovering sphere. The craft was reported 10 feet in width and throughout the incident remained hovering just several feet above the ground. When later examined in a hospital, Gonzalez was found to have several deep red scratch marks down his side. For several days afterwards, he remained under heavy sedation as both men struggled to come to terms with their terrifying ordeal. Barely 2 weeks later, a similar incident occurred in the same locality. On this occasion, two young hunters came across a luminous machine around 10 feet wide, hovering just 2 feet from the ground. 4 or 5 beings were seen to emerge from the craft and then attempted to drag both youths inside. Fighting them off as best they could, one of the young men lashed out with his rifle butt, bringing it down on the head of one of the aliens. Incredibly, the weapon broke into fragments as if it had struck on a rock. Finally managing to break free of the aliens, both youths ran off to summon police, who later reported signs of a struggle. As in the previous incident, both youths required hospital treatment and remained in a highly agitated state for some time afterwards. In Argentina, the year 1965 brought a series of abortive abduction attempts where aliens attempted to take people by force. The national press published numerous reports of these incidents, which bear evidence of a widespread trend of which relatively few cases were adequately investigated. Of those that were, an incident in the province of Chronicles tells of 5 luminous craft observed flying low overhead. One vessel proceeded to land near a farmhouse, and 5 beings around 2 meters tall were then seen to emerge. On their heads were instruments giving off flashes of light. The focus of the beings' attention was immediately directed at the farmhouse. Forcing their way inside, they attempted to overpower the owner and drag him away. Fighting the aliens as best he could, the farmer eventually broke free of his attackers, who fled when other villagers rushed to his assistance. Several days later, the aliens returned and attempted to abduct another man. Once again, villagers turned out in force, firing rifles which, although not able to injure the aliens, was sufficient to drive them away again. The association of Latin America with sky visitors who arrive from the stars goes back thousands of years. To native Indian cultures, these beings brought with them the rudiments of civilization, initiating major developments in science, agriculture, astronomy, and masonry. By the shores of Lake Titicaca, the ancient ruins of Teotihuacan bear a mysterious reflection of those ancient beliefs. Here the imposing Gate of the Sun contains enigmatic hieroglyphs that some have interpreted as advanced astronomical data. The best-selling author Eric von Daniken found the place highly indicative of alien influence. He wrote, "What does legend say about the mysterious city of Teotihuacan? It tells of a golden ship that came from the stars," he continues. What titanic forces were at work here, and to what end? Von Daniken concludes, what secret does this city conceal? What message from other worlds awaits its solution on the Bolivian plateau? Equally evocative of mysterious influence are the Nazca lines etched in the Peruvian desert close to the town of Ica. Here, dead straight lines traverse the desert for dozens of miles. Other shapes include depictions of monkeys, whales, and decorative birds. At ground level, the patterns are barely perceptible and only really become apparent when viewed from the air. Since the antiquity of the lines goes back thousands of years, the question has been asked and re-asked. Why would an ancient people go to such immense effort to construct a line system only visible from the air? Who was meant to see it? Inevitably, von Däniken saw the answer in terms of aliens. He interpreted the lines as markers or landing strips for alien spacecraft. While this may appear a far-fetched explanation, the Indians of that area have other ideas. Their traditions frequently make mention of strange visitors who descend from the sky aboard fiery craft, visitations which they insist have carried on down to present day.
The phrase, "where heaven and earth met," is symbolic of the sacred mountains, and this gives us the clue that this could be somewhere with impressive heaven-like mountains, such as Tibet, perhaps even the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, or even the pyramids of Giza. Seeing as these temple constructions are based on the shamanic world mountain. We can see then that many of the details included in the stories related to the activities of these Shining Ones are really based on these astrotheological movements, which they understood to a great degree, and have been encoded in these myths and stories as a means to preserve this knowledge and also convey this process to those who could understand it. They added encoded information, which also makes these stories somewhat confusing. The story of the Anunnaki is therefore not one just in the remit of Mesopotamia. It is in fact a universal system, observed in the sky, and this is why similarities can be found across the world in ancient cultures. The biblical flood myth matches that found in Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh, and ends with the Tower of Babel in Babylon, which was part of the Sumerian Empire. This shows that the secret knowledge associated with the Shining Ones ended up, and at that time, in Babylon, and then moved on from there. In the search for the Shining Ones, we have come across numerous groups, cults and religions. In ancient Sumeria, we find the Egregor, or Watchers, who are thought to be the angels of the Lord from the Bible, and again the numerous epitaphs given to them tells us they too were the Shining Ones. Enoch wrote about them, in fact for them, in the Book of Enoch, which was later suppressed. In the Bible and the Book of Enoch, these Shining Ones are called angels, archangels, or cherubim. Unless the literature is purely apocryphal, we find that in the Bible, the angel figures are simply earthly men. In the Bible, we do not find angels with wings. There are no original stories of them being supernatural. They are, in fact, quite ordinary. It is always Gabriel, meaning man of God, who informs the people of a coming childbirth. Was he the shaman, the doctor? Michael is the warrior and protector, accompanied by angels wielding swords. Each and every one of them has their own specific duty, an earthly duty. People with titles, angelic titles, as messengers and ambassadors of God, just like the early shaman. The title cherubim means exiles, and could be an indication of the origins of the angels. Maybe they were ordered to leave somewhere for not conforming. Perhaps Eden, where they had previously been the watchers or guardians of the garden. In Genesis 4:16, the land of Nod is symbolic also of the people of Israel, as Nod means wandering. It is not much of an extrapolation to assume that the priesthood were also wanderers. Another example of symbolic titles is that of Enoch, which means consecrated. When Cain and his wife bore Enoch and built a city called Enoch, we have the people of Cain being consecrated before God. Enoch, the consecrated one, would later write up the history of these fallen wanderers who spread across the globe as the great shining ones, teaching, measuring and building the world's most mysterious ancient monuments. Of course, we must not forget the seraphim of Numbers 21:6 and elsewhere. These are not mystical beings. They have hands, a face, legs, but they do have powers from God, because they are in the light, and they have the symbolic wings of the early shaman, the bird of flight, the dreamtime trance ability to fly. Their name means shining ones or fiery serpents. They are enlightened beings via the power of the serpent. Mystical Jewish literature tells us that the angels can fly, tell the future, shapeshift, speak Hebrew, and are emanations of the divine shining light.
There has always been a connection between Native Americans and beings from other parts of the universe, referred to as star people or visitors from space. In Utah's 9 Mile Canyon lies the heaviest concentration of rock art in the world. These depict beings that appear to be not quite completely human. They can be seen next to a disc-shaped object. Other beings of a more human form are raising their hands to these beings near the object. Near Christina Lake, British Columbia, Canada, there is a picture of a white disc with black wings hovering over 4 human figures on their knees. There are lines coming from the top of the disk, which could be rays of light. Longer, more irregular lines come down from the bottom of the object. A rock painting at Cayuse Creek, Idaho, depicts what appears to be a cone-shaped rocket with smoke or flames trailing behind it. In the cone is a humanoid figure, apparently holding on to the inner walls. A pictograph near Kootenay Lake in British Columbia also shows an enclosed vehicle holding a single humanoid figure. It depicts what appear to be sections of the vehicle and 2 objects closely resembling retractable legs for landing. Numerous depictions of egg-shaped objects with wavy lines emanating from them have been found. These could be an effort to show the object in motion or some sort of light or heat. If this were to depict the sun, lines would typically be found all around the circumference of the circle. In these cases, they came only from the bottom side. In certain Cherokee legends, it's said that their people originated in the Pleiades long ago, that claim to have come to this world as star seeds to bring light and knowledge. If the stories are true, then modern-day Cherokee, as well as other Native Americans, and many of us with Native American blood, contain Pleiadian genes. Many Native legends place either their origins or visitation from the Pleiades. It's possible that within this star cluster there are planets where life could exist. Scientists say it's very plausible. Analyzing deep infrared images obtained by the Spitzer Space Telescope and Gemini North Telescope, astronomers discovered that one of the cluster's stars, HD 23514, which has a mass and luminosity a bit greater than that of the Sun, is surrounded by an extraordinary number of hot dust particles. This could be evidence for planet formation around the star. Other stars with the cluster also have sun-like characteristics. The cluster itself is only about 118 parsecs away from Earth. Is it possible that aliens from another star system came to Earth ages ago and helped the tribal people of our planet? Evidence around the world seems to suggest it is not only possible, but that it indeed happened. Ancient astronaut theorists point to many artifacts and structures that early man could not have created. Wall paintings depict the arrival and association with star people all across the Southwest, having visited in circular vehicles and bringing man safety and even technology. Many tribes believe that they are either star people or are descended from them. Native people are often shy about talking about extraterrestrials. Their race has endured much over the years, and they do not want to share many of their sacred beliefs. Many of their beliefs have been lost as well over time, or only a few elders know the legends of their people. Suffice it to say, there is an abundance of evidence that early tribes of natives did indeed have contact with one or more races from the stars. Almost all of them say that one day, when the world is ready, these star people will return. Perhaps then all who inhabit this planet, the natives of our Earth, will be ready physically, mentally, and spiritually to greet these ancient travelers from the stars.